sitting here right now thinking about it, you look back almost 150 years, and Antonio Catano Alvernaz left one of the 9 Azores Islands. This is an archipelago about 1,000 miles off the coast of Europe. And he sailed around, coming into San Francisco Bay, we think somewhere about 10 years after the Civil War, about 1875 or so, when he would have been about 20 years of age. You know, my aunt, you may want to say something about Grandma coming over.
Well, our mother came over from the Azores Islands also, and she was 14 years old when she arrived here. Her family thought it best to let her come to be with uncles here. They could see the better opportunities for her. She worked very hard and later married Antonio Catano Alvernaz and started a family here in Fremont.
This would be, the first generation here would be my aunt and my mother's mother. And in about, when was it, Mom? 1918 you were born to Maria Alvernaz? When were you born?
In
1914.
14.
1914.
Yeah. I want to say 1914.
And then you went to Warm Springs Grammar School?
Warm Springs Grammar School, Washington Union High School, San Jose State.
Yes.
And what was the nature of the school then? How many kids were at Warm Springs Grammar School?
Our graduating class, there were 8 of us.
And mine in 51, had 8 in there too. So you can see the growth of Warm Springs did not develop that much. What was the nature of the demographics? Were they primarily Portuguese kids, or?
They were mostly Portuguese. There were a few Japanese, but.
Well, you know, it's really reflective of the time. During the Depression, this widow farmed out the upper, or the whole portion of the ranch.
The whole portion of the ranch. We had Japanese taking care of the ranch. And whatever their, I don't know whether it was a partnership, how it worked, but they were very instrumental in keeping our property going. And we have great respect for the Japanese people.
And so Dad raised oat hay there well into the 60s. Even after NUMMI had acquired the property, he continued to rent it along with my uncle, and they raised the hay there. Well, Mom and Dad were talking one day, and I happened to overhear it, and I was about 15 years old. And they had received an offer from the railroad, I think it was WP, Western Pacific, for the property, and whether they should accept it or not, because it was a huge amount of money then. And, you know, they said, but it's our ranch. And then Mom said, but suppose if progress stops only at Irvington, and it doesn't come any further and never hits Warm Springs, maybe we should sell. And so indeed, they sold the property and then paid $21,750 for a home up in Mission Ranch. Huge amount of money for this beautiful home that they still have up there. General Motors was welcomed. They were a force and obviously going to provide a lot of jobs. And it, you know, literally is the only California automobile manufacturing plant that we have. So, yeah, it's always been a very welcome partner in our community. We're in the Apricot Festival of 1947, Mom, and you were selling war bonds back in 43, 44 with the YLI. I mean, the whole social fiber ran very deep throughout the community. And it stuck around primarily your heritage, your schools, your religion, and your community. And, you know, in the 50s, I worked for Wally Pond. Wally was, of course, one of the first consulmen the city. And so I watched the formation during that 1955 from the confines of his drugstore in Irvington as he went forward in trying so dramatically. Wally just put his heart and soul into the formation of the city, and all of the arguments and all of the difficulties. Should we call it Mission Valley? Should we call it Fremont? He and so many of the others. In Warm Springs, Bruce Michael was the father of one of my classmates, and I used to spend time up at Bruce's ranch up on Brown Road and just listening to him talk about his visions for this city. When I graduated from UC Med Center, I came back and opened up a pharmacy up in Niles, and ultimately I had, I think George Simon and I had 5 pharmacies. In '74, one of my friends said, "Harry, we'd like to have you on the hospital board." And so after interviews and such, I went on the hospital board for the next 20 years. And with my wife, Janet, we established in honor of her father, Gene Pisano, the Gene Angelo golf tournament. Well, one of the most fascinating things was, I mentioned that I started out with a small, what we call pot-belly drugstore, where people would come into back in the early 60s. And one of the interesting elements then was that I had so many primary people who had participated in the movie industry in Niles. It was fascinating to listen to these people and their stories when they came in and talked about Charlie Chaplin and Bronco Billy Anderson and Vic Potel and the Snakeville comedies and the westerns and all Chaplin's going on. And so proud to see what Bruce Cates and the SNA Film Museum has done today in bringing all those about. The future is one in which there is huge opportunity. Opportunities in education, opportunities in development, and opportunities to bringing a populace that's very diversified together in a cohesive element.
Well, thank you for having us, and hope we've given you some information that'll be useful to you.
Yeah, particularly good. The ramblings that go on as you begin to creak open those points in your memory are always interesting as you begin to see what's back there. But it's been an interesting, what do we have here? We have 85, 92, 67. So if you add those up relatively quickly, it's roughly 250 years of experience of being in Fremont.